This is the first attempt, and probably the last attempt, of me doing a PowerPoint presentation. Most of you know that when I do make a presentation, I just have some yellow sheets I dribble some notes on. But today I'm trying to go high tech here on you. Deborah and I had a conversation about Sauvignon Blanc, and I was talking to her about a little bit about my experiences with Sauvignon Blanc, and so then that created this discussion that I'm going to give you today. She asked me to talk to you about my experiences, and you know what? Experiences for somebody like me, you can take or leave. So I looked up a couple definitions from farmers like myself. And one of the definitions is good judgment comes from experience, and a lot of that comes from bad judgment. And the other one I found that I like is experience enables you to recognize a mistake when you make it again. So in context of today, that's sort of my background. The first thing I did was I charted from the California Grape Acreage Report the acreage of California Sauvignon Blanc from 1971 to 2008. You can see that there was under 2,000 acres in 1971, and then it rose to a high of 15,000 plus acres, and then it dwindled down, and then it went back up. Now, interestingly enough, the North Coast represents about 50% of the total Sauvignon Blanc acres. That's the 4 counties plus a little bit of Sonoma. And Napa and Sonoma alone have almost 6,000 acres of Sauvignon Blanc out of this 15,000 acres. The Central Coast represents about 21%, and the San Joaquin Delta is 24%. The rest of this acreage comes from the rest of the districts. I started my career in, believe it or not, 1965. That's 45 years ago. For Shinley Industries in Delano, we farmed 5,000 acres in Kern and Tulare counties. And I don't remember Sauvignon Blanc, so I decided, well, I'm going to go back and see what was planted. Well, in 1969, there was 73 acres of Sauvignon Blanc in those counties listed there: Madera, Fresno, Tulare, Kings, and Kern County. In 2008, there were still only 224 acres. Primarily, the Sauvignon Blanc is not grown in districts 13 and 14. However, I went and looked at the tonnage report for 2009 from the crush report, which I think is very accurate, and districts 12 and 13 had 7,671 tons. Now, so obviously somebody has not reported somewhere in the neighborhood of 500 or 600 acres plus in those districts. So I guess that puts a little bit of concern about how accurate is this grape acreage report, and it's a little pet peeve of mine, but I haven't ever got anybody to make it mandatory. It's a huge increase from 1974 to 1995 of over 12,000 acres, or 382%. And then from 97 to 2008, it increased by 4,000 acres. There are some reasons for that are very intriguing, and I'm going to get to those in a second. But I'm going to move to Napa Valley, and I started with 1970 because I came in 1971 to the Napa Valley. I went to work for Andy Beckstoffer, farming Beaulieu and Inglenook's vineyards, and we had 7 acres of Sauvignon Blanc, and at Beaulieu that went into a sweet wine called Chateau Beaulieu, and a little bit of it went into a dry Semillon. And virtually it was until 1971 that I even knew anything about Sauvignon Blanc. It was a beautiful 7-acre vineyard. And then you can see it's almost a mirror image of the state, where the tonnage went way up in 1988 to 3,645 acres. Then it went back down. In 2008, we had 2,382 acres. But I got the crop report from Dave Whitmer, our ag commissioner. And in 2009, we had 2,840 acres. 269 acres of that is non-bearing, about 1%. I think that's a significant number because in the coastal districts, I see Sauvignon Blanc continuing to grow. And Nancy Sweet furnished me some history that I thought was very fascinating. H.W. Crabb at Tokelon Vineyards had Sauvignon Blanc in the 1880s. Now, my mind is that Robert Mondavi, am I correct, Richard, that Robert Mondavi has still Sauvignon Blanc in the Tokelon Vineyard? So that's amazing to me that that's 130 years ago, and today we still have Sauvignon Blanc in the same vineyard. In 1980, in 1979, I went to work for Behringer. And in 1980, my wife and I went to Europe for 3 weeks. And the first winery that we visited was Chateau Yquem. We had a wonderful tasting, and I was determined to buy a bottle of Chateau Yquem. I went into the village, and I bought a 1975 Chateau Yquem. The man there said, "You're from California and you grow grapes?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Well, you make Sauterne." And I said, "No, we don't make Sauterne." And, "Yes, you do." And he goes in the back room and he comes out and he has a gill label that says Sauterne on it. And to this day, my history is that I've worked as hard as I could when able to protect the Appalachians, particularly Napa Valley, but all Appalachians. And that was a very embarrassing moment. Now, I got to tell you an interesting sideline. I paid $100 for that bottle. I slept it all through Europe. I got home, I went down to the local store, and it was $40 in the local store. So who says the French can't take advantage of us? I don't know. I think some of the reasons that we had this growth, well, first of all, I can't explain it all, but the consumer demand for white wines during that period of time from 74 to 95 was tremendous. You probably remember where people quit drinking hard liquor pre-dinner and went to white wines. But amazingly enough, in 1966, Robert Mondavi produced a Fumé Blanc for the first time. Instead of making Sauterne-style wines, he went to a dry wine that had some barrel aging on it. It was wonderful with food. I didn't even know what Fumé Blanc was. I had to go find out that Fumé Blanc was really Sauvignon Blanc. In my mind, it's Robert Mondavi Winery and his expertise that actually put Sauvignon Blanc on the map for California. And I can't tell you, everybody knows how much Robert Mondavi and the winery did for the California agriculture and for the wine industry, but this was amazing to me that he came up with this concept. And then you got to recognize that for California, the wine quality really improved and the production was really good. I skipped over the fact that certain soils were not desirable for Cabernet. When I went to work for Behringer, the white wine boom was in full force. We were growing 15-18% a year. We had a lot of river bottom Cabernet and Merlot that made average quality wines. So in 1980, we started grafting the Cabernet and the Merlot to Sauvignon Blanc because by this time we had recognized that Sauvignon Blanc, excuse me, would do very well if it was managed correctly on these deep fertile soils. Now, I know there's going to be people out there that argue with me, but to this day, I still think the correct soil type for red varieties is extremely important. And Sauvignon Blanc fits into some of these river bottom soils, and you can do quite well with it. That's my theory, and I'm going to stick with it. Now, I looked at the Gomberg wine data report because, not only do we need to grow this, but we got to decide, do we really want to grow it? Are we going to make money? Are we going to move forward? Well, it was pretty interesting because in 2009, the traditional table wine volume of 188 million cases, Sauvignon Blanc represented 7.4 million cases. Now, Nat DeBudio predicted that the success of Pinot Gris, traditional viewed as a lower priced wine, may become a wine of choice. Sauvignon Blanc may fall victim. And then he projected that our projections for Sauvignon Blanc bearing acreage between now and 2011 is flat, but demand is soft at all price points. I'm going to argue with him a little bit about that, and boy, that is really a dumb old farmer to argue with Nat DeBudio, but in one of the recent Nelson data publications that I just picked up the other day, there seems to be a resurgence in higher value wines. Over $20 in grocery stores and drugstores is up 12.6%, which is the highest percentage increase in a year. And the average price of a bottle is $25.80. Sauvignon Blanc is up 9.8%. The average price is $8. Now, I got to tell you, in Napa Valley, I don't think you can sell a bottle of wine for $8, but it may happen. And Pinot Gris is up 3.4%. So Nat's figures were in January, and my figures are last week. So when we first planted Sauvignon Blanc in these deep fertile soils, we had to learn how to achieve vine balance and reduced vegetative aromas and overall vegetable flavors. I don't know if any of you are experiencing that, but I think Sauvignon Blanc is a very vigorous variety, and trying to get it into balance is a pretty good trick. And again, we chose to plant Sauvignon Blanc on these deep, fertile river bottom soils that had a lot of water holding capacity, and so we had to learn how to manage these sites. And our winemaking staff, and this was 5 or 6 different wineries, would not tolerate vegetative aromas or flavors, period. In fact, I used to quip, why don't we just plant French Colombard and go on with life? But this is my story for California Sauvignon Blanc, what I think makes a good California Sauvignon Blanc. And I want to digress here for just a second and say, Joe Heitz once told me, we were at a tasting and all the guys were comparing their wines to the Bordeaux wines, and he said, if you want to make a Bordeaux wine, why don't you move to France? And I've always kept that theory, and I'm saying we're in California, we're in the coastal districts, or wherever we are, we should make a California Sauvignon Blanc, and we should become of age, and I think we have become of age. We're now our own people, and we've grown up. And so I like complex aromas and flavors and fruit flavors. I happen to like minerality in some of these wines, ripe intensity, vivid acidity, and balance, but not alcoholic. I don't like alcoholic wines. Okay, so what we did in the vineyards to achieve vine balance and reduce vegetative character and improve wine quality. Well, the first thing we did was we moved from a region 1 Canaris to a region 2 or 3, which is Oakville, and Knights Valley, Calistoga, Anderson, Alexander Valley, And believe me, the colder the district, the more vegetative character you get in most varieties. We also tried to increase the yields from 5 to 7 tons per acre. I went back to the Napa Valley crop report, and I took the average, a 5-year average, except for 72 to 74, because 1970 and 70, they did not report the tonnage. But you can see here that we have achieved in the Napa Valley, and I'm sure Sonoma and other counties are a mirror image of this. We've gone from a little over 3 tons to the acre to an average of over 5. I did get 2009, and it was a little over 5 tons the acre. It was interesting because in 1997, the crop report in Napa Valley and the state crop report started another variety they called Sauvignon Musqué, and the yields are significantly lower in Napa Valley. From 97 to 2008 by 1.4 tons per acre, some 30%. Now I know Sauvignon Musqué is a desirable clone or selection, and we had some at Behringer that we really liked. But one needs to keep in mind that these yields may be quite a bit less. And of course, everybody knows that Carol Meredith proved that Sauvignon Musqué and Sauvignon Blanc are the same variety. And then note that FPS 27 was registered in 2002 and is now available from Shoot Tip Culture Sauvignon Musqué 01. So we were effective in increasing the yields, and then we learned about leaf removal and moderate cluster exposure. And primarily this, I discovered how important this was from work done by Andy Bledsoe and Mark Cleaver, and then again in R.A. Arnold and Andy Bledsoe now. But at this time, Andy was the viticulturalist for Robert Mondavi Winery. So here they go again, making this great contribution, because I believe this work was done on Sauvignon Blanc in the Woodland Valley. And the light came on for me. I knew before 1990 because I'd been talking to people who had done this work. And when we were in the table grapes in Delano, the table grape growers in Delano would do what they call tunneling on Ribera and Emperor to get higher color. They would have this beautiful canopy. They go underneath. You probably know more about this than I do, but anyway, we would pull leaves around the grape clusters, and we'd get much higher intensity of color. And to me, leaf removal is one of the big things that has improved the wine qualities all through California. Now, yeah, we overdid it, you know. But by work of Nick DeKuzlian, is he here? And some other people. And besides, you know, we're not dumb. We went out and saw that we were getting a lot of sunburning and dehydration. Well, you know, you got to adapt to that. But anyway, I think in Sauvignon Blanc, filtered light exposure will really reduce the vegetative character and improve wine quality. Some of our winemakers chose to blend Semillon. And of course, you must really control irrigation management, fertilizer management, trellis and training. And I didn't put rootstock in there because I'm hoping Phil will talk about rootstock. I'm still struggling with what the heck rootstock do you want to use. On deep fertile soils, I know you don't want to use 1103. It's way too vigorous. But here's some good examples of how we at Behringer and other people, in fact, control the vine vigor and got the capacity and vine vigor in balance. And one of the ways is with a lyre system and then the GDC. And I always had kind of a controversy about the Lyre versus the GDC because the Lyre system is a hell of a lot more money to install and maintain. And I sort of like the GDC, but I just had a conversation with Jim Freisinger, and he says that they know that the Lyre system gives more uniformity in terms of fruit. And so with that in mind, I know he's right. A couple of other places that really intrigue me. Again, these are in deep fertile soils. In Rutherford, the picture on the left is a dry farmed, organic farmed vineyard. It's on St. George, about 4 canes per vine. It produces about 7 tons to the acre fairly consistently. And it's a beautiful, beautiful vineyard, makes beautiful wines. The vineyard on the Alexander Valley is on the Russian River. Believe it or not, the rootstock is 3309. It is cane pruned, and it produces consistently 6-7 tons to the acre. A very high quality fruit, very desirable fruit. So I guess my point is that if you do plant these Sauvignon Blanc vineyards and you pick the right rootstock and the right irrigation technology and the right spacing and training systems, you can produce really high quality fruit. In Rutherford, this is a vineyard I really like. It was planted 28 years ago on St. George. The Rob Mondavi was, they went to Rob Mondavi and got the budwood. This vineyard is still here, produces about 4 tons the acre and does quite well in terms of high wine quality. And I got to tell you that I was a big fan of AXR. So when you want to talk about bad judgment, well, that's why I love this vineyard, because this guy made good judgment by planting at St. George. The vineyard in Calistoga is a very young vineyard. It's on 110 rootstock, but these soils are on an alluvial fan, and so they're less deep and they're well drained. This vineyard is obviously cordon pruned and spur pruned, but it is 6 by 6, and the yields are adequate and still coming up, but this is a very nice site, and so, you know, if you want to plant in this kind of site, you're well to do it. Now, I wasn't going to show this picture, but I knew that Deborah had it, and I had to own up to it. In 1990, we at Behringer were planting hundreds of acres of vineyard, and one of the vineyards that we wanted to plant was the old Asti facility, and along the river, we chose to plant Sauvignon Blanc. And for whatever reason, I can't remember, we chose Freedom as the rootstock. Went to one of our grower vineyards in Alexander Valley, about 6-7 tons to the acre, beautiful Sauvignon Blanc. The winemaker loved it. The wines were great. We took the budwood from that, and 20% of the vines that we budded to had Corky Bark. They came up the stake, they died. Deborah came over, she diagnosed it, and so I can't enforce to you how much you need to make sure, absolutely sure, that you're having clean planting materials. If you look at the row behind, where you can see where we took a cutting and the guy budded from that cutting and the vines all died. But the vines behind did quite well. And it was a matter of it had Corky Bark or didn't have Corky Bark. And by the way, you know, the Freedom is doing quite well there. It's a good rootstock, but boy, it does show up Corky Bark. I went back after the fact and looked at this vineyard that was on AXR, and if you looked really hard, you could just see a very pale yellow on about 20% of the vines. So live and learn, huh? So to finalize here, I believe that when we understood where and how to grow grapes and make the wine, the quality really improved. Can we continue to learn and improve? Absolutely. Some people say that experience and knowing the history will help you to predict the future. But I say the best way to predict the future is to create it and never be afraid to try something new. And finally, Wayne Gretzky's advice: I skate to where the puck is going to be, not to where it has been. Thank you.
Do you think cane pruning is significantly better than cordon? Or use it on the a variant of that on the wire trunks?
The question was cane versus cordon. Cane, yes, absolutely.
One more.
You say consistent yields. Do you mean that that's the consistent average across blocks, or from year to year, they're consistent?
Could you repeat it too?
Exactly between 5 and 7 times.
Obviously, the yields vary a little bit, but I'm talking about year to year. And yeah, we try to gain consistency in our blocks. Yeah, that's the average yields we're trying to achieve, between 5 and 7 tons the acre. I think if you look at it from a financial point of view, you'll see that you probably need those kind of yields. Then what I showed you, where I took the Napa Valley average, that was the whole Napa Valley 5-year average.
I guess I'm wondering how you would characterize the variability in year-to-year yields in Sauvignon Blanc versus other varieties.
I think Sauvignon Blanc is a pretty easy variety to grow, and it's fairly consistent. Yeah, there are variations. There will be variations. But typically we're in that range, you know, a normal range of, say, a 3 or 4, well, you know, 2 or 3 tons difference is a big difference, but anyway, that's the consistency that we are hoping for, and we can pretty much achieve that, I think. One thing I would say about cordon pruning is that if you're on a really vegetative site, you can't adapt to the cordon can't adapt. I mean, you have to put Crenot canes on or something like that. I don't like doing that. I see it being done and done successfully, and that's why I think cane pruning is the way to go, because you can vary the number of fruitful buds that you're during the winter pruning. Thank you.